Hey folks, this is Silver Smoke coming at you with another video. This won't be a video of me running around shooting guns. Wish it could be, but I'm poor and ammunition and supplies related to shooting is unfortunately been very hard to find, thanks to some recent political events. So the topic of this video won't be anything cool like that. Instead, it's going to be dry, boring, but nevertheless necessary information regarding the truth about gun control. And what I want to do is review this very informative ATF crime gun trace analysis report on Chicago, Illinois. This book documents pretty much 27 communities of firearm violence. This is the 1999 edition. This is the latest one I was able to get a hold of at my local library. So I don't know how often they compile this report, but I was able to pick up a copy of it and discovered some interesting facts that I think are relevant to our discussion regarding gun control, especially with recent developments regarding Newtown and the national debate on whether or not we should tighten background checks or regulate certain kinds of firearms and magazines and things like that. This is compiled by the Department of the Treasury, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and this report illustrates the most frequent. This particular page deals with the most frequent crime gun trace requests, type, manufacturer, and caliber by age of possessor. Now, the import of this document is that it tells us of the number of firearms that the ATF recovers from bad guys and traces the history of. It tells us their make, their model, and the caliber. So we'll be able to look at this and be able to determine whether or not, not whether or not assault weapons are being used in this, but we can use this to determine how effective a gun control policy is going to be. I've used Chicago as an analysis city because A, it's where I'm from, so it's kind of my plug of the city, but more than that, it also is a great example because Chicago, at the time of this report, which is in the late 1990s, had an outright ban on handguns. It's not the case anymore thanks to the Heller decision from the Supreme Court, but at the time of this report, handguns were prohibited by civilians, for civilian ownership by the city. So, and every other firearm law that you can think of in terms of restrictions on background checks, state-mandated background checks, mental health screening, city permitting, state permitting, and assault weapons bans and magazine capacity restrictions, all of that is law in Chicago, and it was definitely the case during the period of this report. So we'll be able to look at this and know how effective an assault weapons ban is, because if bad guys are still getting guns somehow, they're still using guns, then we can see how effective that law would be. And if it works or doesn't work in Chicago, then it will work or won't work in the national level. I think that just makes casual sense. So with that being said, let's look at the documentation. It shows here, Table D, most frequent crime gun trace requests by caliber, type, manufacturer, and age of possessor. So if firearms like AR15s or AKs were being used frequently by bad guys, we would see that on the list here. And if you notice something about this list, those of you who know a lot about guns already can know what I'm about to say. But for those of you who don't, I'll explain it like this. You can see the most common type of crime gun that they've recovered from juveniles age 17 and under during this period of time is a good old lowly .38 revolver. Okay. So, of all the guns that they were able to trace, the most common weapon used wasn't an AR-15 or even a handgun, for that matter. It was a revolver, okay, .38 caliber. Next on the list is a semi-automatic pistol, a Davis .380, which is a gun that's maybe about the size of this table, okay, maybe about that long by about that tall, and holds about maybe 6 rounds, I think, 6 rounds of .380. Lorcan .380, same deal, cheap, small. Most people would call those Saturday night specials. Next on the list we have Bryco 9mm. Again, not exactly a Glock 17 or a high quality firearm that we're talking about here. Then we come to the Raven, which is a .25 caliber. Definitely not an assault weapon cartridge by any stretch of the imagination, and no military has ever used that round ever, as far as I know. Then we come to the Colt revolver, which is in .38 special. Okay, again, not exactly a high-velocity rifle cartridge we're talking about here. In fact, the most deadly weapon in terms of caliber is a revolver, which is the Smith & Wesson .357, presumably .357 Magnum, and that's not even 2% of the total here. So looking at this report, we see that most of the weapons that you're likely to encounter as a victim of gun violence or victim of an attempted rape or assault. I said rape twice. It wasn't my intention, but you have most common weapon that you're likely to encounter as a victim of firearm crime in Chicago is going to be a cheap Saturday night special. It's not going to be an AK-47. It's not going to be an AR-15. It's not even going to be a gun that has a double-stack magazine. Semi-automatic weapons like this one, which is a Smith & Wesson 5904 that you've seen in my other videos, guns like this take a 15-round magazine. You know, they have double-stack bodies kind of like this, and that's how they work. They're double-stack magazines. This is what the antis are proposing. They're proposing that magazines like this should be banned or restricted to law enforcement only. And the idea behind restricting civilians to 10-round magazines is that it will reduce the lethality of the weapon. Well, that logic is all well and good if bad guys actually used handguns like this in crime. As we can see from the report here, they don't. Okay, they use handguns and revolvers that don't even carry 8 rounds in a magazine. None of these weapons on this list have a 10-round capacity. So the idea of regulating firearms by magazine capacity to reduce crime and reduce deaths in that regard is not going to do a thing. It's not going to do anything because, as you can see from the report here, none of these weapons will be affected by a magazine capacity. Me as a civilian, I own this gun and have a high capacity magazine because that's just what it came with. And when I say high capacity, I mean it has more than 10 rounds. Not that this is a higher capacity than what the gun was designed with. This pistol was originally made with a 15-round magazine capacity. So, with that stated, okay, how does taking and seizing this, okay, going to change that? And realistically, it won't. Okay, the statistics, if the bad guys were using guns like this in crimes, the statistics would show that the most common weapon used would be a Smith & Wesson or a Glock or a SIG or any other kind of handgun with a double stack magazine. And then what we see here is that is not the case at all. If bad guys were using rifles like AR-15s, AK-47s for criminal intent, we would also see that reflected in the gun trace from the ATF themselves. And again, nothing of that sort is on this list. Even if we take the New York SAFE Act, which regulates firearms to such the extent that you can't even have a 7-round loaded in your weapon or a 7-round magazine, they're making a law that says you can't even buy a gun with a 7-round magazine or more. And most of these weapons are single stack Saturday night specials that don't even carry 8, okay, or even 7. So, even the New York SAFE Act wouldn't stop these guys from carrying a gun. If you busted a street hood with the most common handgun they're likely to carry, there's no gun law in this country, even the most restrictive ones, that would affect them. And this is why there's a lot of acrimony regarding gun laws, because the antis, or I should say, the gun control supporters, they say, well, we should pass stricter laws to save lives and all that, and it's well and good and well-intentioned goal. I mean, nobody wants to see more people get killed, but the reason that you see such fierce opposition against the gun control movement by the NRA and other groups is because they look at statistics like this and go, okay, where's the beef? Okay, where do we see a difference? How does taking or regulating this gun stop a bad guy from carrying these guns? And the anti-gun movement hasn't really answered that question or addressed it. And furthermore, there's deeper issues regarding social issues and and things of that sort with regard to gun violence. And because if you look at this list here, it's a juvenile age category, ages 17 and under. Most of these kids can't legally possess guns anyway because federal law says you have to be 18 to own a firearm. So, we're looking at this here, and what we see is not a situation of gun laws being too free or gun laws being too weak. What we see here is a social problem. That's what we see here. We see a social problem of kids deciding to take up arms against each other, and that's a conversation that we need to be having, and that's a conversation nobody wants to discuss. So, being a man of color, as you can see, obviously, from Chicago. I think that this is a discussion that we need to have, and instead of focusing on the equipment, what we need to do is we need to focus on why gang members and gangs and all these places are getting people to join their youth, these organizations, and do all these evil things. That's what we need to discuss, not how to ban magazines, okay? We need to worry about our kids. We need to do something about why we have gang culture in this country, and we need to do something about that social problem, okay? Taking law-abiding firearm owners weapons like these, when none of them are even being used in a crime, does nothing. Okay, we need to actually solve the problem, and to do that, we need to quit focusing on the firearms and equipment, and we need to take a social problem approach to this. Okay, so Obama's initiatives regarding gun violence, okay, it's well intentioned, but it's missing the point. We can't regulate firearms when bad guys who are 15, 16, 17 years old are motivated to do crime. Okay, we need to change that dynamic, and I want to see our political leaders, okay, to instead of dodging the issue and trying to demonize lawful gun owners and use us as scapegoats for their policy failures, we need to focus on the social issues at hand. And this is not me making this point up. I'm not throwing this out there just to be a loudmouth on the internet. This is documented proof from the ATF themselves, from one of the premier law enforcement agencies in this country. So, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to post them on my web zone, and I really encourage you all to check out a copy of this report and any other gun violence control documentation that's released from your local library. They're a great resource, and even though we have the internet, we should still take a moment to look at good old-fashioned book paper, and I think that this would be a really good read for a lot of people, both for and against gun rights in America. So, thank you for watching. Thanks for checking out my channel, and I invite you to look at my other videos on this subject, and safe travels, safe shooting, and long live American Republic. Silver Smoke signing off.